everybody. Welcome to my channel. This is Dr. Novak. This is one of those videos that I've been putting off for years, in fact, only because it will upset a lot of people and make quite a few hobbyists mad. So I really haven't done it. I've been procrastinating on doing a video like this, but I got an email from somebody, from a Gary Conway, and he sent me some information which I knew about, and I will leave you a link below, so in case you want to go to MECC, which is in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, which is Mountain Empire Community College, and they have a program where they teach wastewater management and microbiology of wastewater. This is not the only college or university that does this, but when he brought this up and sent it to me, Gary, I finally thought, well, you know, I ought to do the video even though it's going to upset quite a few people. And stay tuned to the very end because I will give my comments, and that's probably where people are going to get very, very upset. But anyway, at this college, they are teaching wastewater management, that people can get a degree and then go on to a four-year college and continue on their microbiology, whether it be in sewage treatment facilities or wastewater management for a town or something else. And you need to know microbiology, and anyone who's a limnologist or a microbiologist who deals in freshwater systems all has to go through this and learn this, what is being taught. But people have often made comments to me about what I talk about isn't right and it's not the right way. And I always bring up the question and ask them the question, then if it's not with the way you're using, can you prove to me that it's being taught in colleges? Can you prove to me that there's been any scientific research of what you are using as a biological filtration system? And can you prove it to me through textbooks or anything else and show me that I am wrong? I'll be more than happy to debate and listen to you. I don't want anecdotal accounts from hobbyists. I want true facts, like the United States government or something doing research or on a larger scale than just a hobbyist scale. Now, when you deal with wastewater management, there are things to remember here in the United States, and I'm talking about the U.S. Here in the United States, the EPA has jumped in and demanded that any wastewater facility has to have nitrates below 10 parts per million. They are not allowed for municipal water treatment facilities to send out water that has nitrates higher than any more than 10 parts per million. And the reason this is because nitrates are harmful to humans and animals. Okay? No matter what people say, no matter what people tell you about fish, nitrates are harmful. They do damage. In about 1940s or so, it was believed that nitrates were good, but this was the only research we had back in the 1940s. Then they found out that nitrates were very, very bad, like for babies, and they would have to get a blood transfusion because their nitrate levels were way off the charts. Nitrates are not a good thing for any animal to be subject to at high levels. Sewage treatment facilities know this, and therefore the EPA has set laws for our sewage treatment facilities here in the United States that they cannot have nitrates above 10 parts per million going to our faucets. Now, as long as we understand that, this is what's being taught in universities and colleges throughout the world. And because of this, we have 330 million people living in the United States that depend on these sewage treatment facilities to give them clean, pure water that has either very low nitrates of under 10 parts per million or non-existing nitrates and phosphates. Because usually if your nitrates are going to be non-existent, you're most likely going to have phosphates that will be non-existent. I have lived in 7 different states, and I have tested water in 7 different states, and I have not found a municipal water treatment plant to have nitrates anything above even 1 part per million of nitrates, and usually in phosphates it's 0.01 part per million or something like that. And that's in 7 different states that I've lived in. So, and that's in the United States. But anyway, this video is one of those videos that everybody will enjoy, but you're also going to learn some new words. Carbonation microbes. You probably never heard of a carbonation microbe. You're going to learn a little bit about this. I am going to read you excerpts from a lesson that's being taught in our colleges right now today about anoxic filtration. It's being taught right in our universities as I speak. And I am going to read excerpts. This is not me adding anything. I will try to explain something that I feel that maybe you don't understand. But these are the true lessons that they are teaching to microbiologists for sewage treatment facilities. This whole subject is going to be on nitrification and denitrification. It's going to be on the actual factual nitrification process, not the process that we hobbyists think it is, but the real process of denitrification and nitrification and how it really works, not this fictitious stuff that you've seen on the internet or what people draw up little drawings and thinking that freshwater systems, natural, I will use that word natural freshwater system, not man-made. There are hundreds and thousands of lakes and ponds that are man-made, but they use a whole different kind of thing than natural systems that were made by Mother Nature. They use a whole different kind of technology because of they're being man-made. They're not naturally made. Our aquariums are not naturally made aquariums. They are artificial biotopes that we create and that we use technology from sewage treatment facilities. Everything that we use in our aquarium comes from wastewater management and sewage treatment facilities. Your undergravel filter, your canister filter, your hang-on-the-back filter, your sponge filters, your sumps, your wet-dry filters, your spray filters. All these filters are derivative of wastewater management filtration systems. They are just shrunken down to fit our aquarium. They are copies of how we clean our water to make it drinkable and safe for our generation and future generations. So this may be a little long video, but I suggest then you go get a cup of coffee, you sit down, relax, get your iPad, your computer, your laptop, whatever. This is going to be a lesson right out of the textbooks that are being taught at our colleges and universities. Okay, with this lesson, this is lesson number 8. And lesson number 8 is from MECC. And this is one of the lessons they teach their microbiologists, and it's right from the textbooks, is what I'm going to give you. Nitrification and denitrification. Objective. In this lesson, we will answer the following questions. How nitrogen is broken down? What is nitrates and nitrites? And how does the treatment plant deal with nitrates? This is going to be a real shocker when I read this, because it is going to make people upset and mad. But this is the way it is. So, when we get to this, we will get to the introduction of this lesson. Bacterial removal, nitrogen from wastewater, by a two-step process, biological process. Nitrification followed by denitrification. Technically, it is a three-step process. Ammonification precedes nitrification and denitrification. While traveling through sewer pipes, the majority of the nitrogen contained in raw sewage, urine, and fecal matter is converted from organic nitrogen to ammonia through a process called hydrolysis. Biological nitrification is the micromedia process of oxidizing ammonia to remove nitrous compounds from wastewater. Domestic sewage typically contains 20 to 40 milligrams per liter of ammonia nitrogen, which is NH4 minus N. Okay, now convert that so you understand what milligrams is. That would be 1 milligram is 1 part per million. So if you're dealing with 20 to 40 parts per million of ammonia, that's nothing like you'll see in your aquarium. Ammonia levels that high will literally burn the gills of fish. It'll burn their eyes. It'll burn your eyes. It'll even burn your skin when you're dealing with ammonia levels of that high, 40 parts per million. So I'm just letting you know that the extreme that they have to deal with when it comes to ammonia, the ammonification process. Releasing this ammonia into receiving streams has a direct toxic effect on fish and other animals. In addition, causes significant oxygen depletion. Let's see, organic matter containing nitrogen, example proteins and molecular acid, also biodegrades to release ammonia. Okay, nitrate is regarded as an undesirable substance in public waters. Now wait a second here. It's saying in this lesson that nitrates is regarded as an undesirable substance. When you hear hobbyists on YouTube claiming that, oh, I've had my fish subject to 100 parts per million, 300 parts per million of nitrates, and yet the United States government and universities are saying nitrate is regarded as an undesirable substance in public water. Although it occurs naturally in water, elevated levels of nitrate in groundwater usually result from human activities such as overuse of chemical fertilization in agriculture and improper disposal of human and animal waste. High nitrate concentrations in drinking water may cause serious problems in humans and animals. Like I explained to you, they found this out in the 1940s. So if it causes serious problems to humans and animals, but it doesn't cause any problems to fish? No. In order to protect against this effort, the U.S. EPA established the maximum contamination level of nitrate in drinking water as no more than 10 parts per million of NO3. I show you a graph here of how they drew out the nitrogen cycle and the denitrification process that they have to go through to get the nitrates out of our drinking water. Boy, aren't you glad they're not fish hobbyists? Because we would have our drinking water full of 300 parts per million of nitrates. But anyhow, I digress. I'll get on to the lesson. The next effect is that it takes 4.5 milligrams of oxygen to fully oxidize 1 milligram of ammonia, N. Therefore, even small concentrations of ammonia can cause significant deterioration to the flora and fauna in the body of water receiving it. Thus, many domestic and industrial wastewater treatment plants are required to remove ammonia before discharge of the treated water. Source of ammonia, nitrate, and nitrites. Ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite can be typically be found in the surface water supplied as a result of natural processes. These natural sources of nitrogen generally have minimum impact on water supply distribution system because the concentration of nitrogen in surface and groundwater is normally far below 0.1 milligrams a liter. As I have explained in my videos, fish are very seldom exposed to nitrate readings even of 1 part per million. Okay, it continues. To protect public health, any system with a source water that exceeds the inorganic contamination MLCS for nitrate and nitrite of 10 milligrams a liter and 1 milligram a liter as nitrogen must treat the water to below those levels. That is the government mandate. Okay? It's just us hobbyists think that we can have these exceeding numbers of nitrates and phosphates because it doesn't do any harm. Yet, the United States government says differently. No. It damages humans, it damages animals, it damages the fauna and the flora of natural systems. No, you are not allowed to have nitrates above higher than 10 parts per million going into a natural system. Okay, then it goes on with some other disinfecting practices, absence of sunlight. These aren't really that important for us. These are more for sewage treatment facility learning. Excuse me. So I will get in operation activities. I'll get a little bit of that. Nitrifying bacteria are slow-growing organisms, and nitrification problems usually occur in large reservoirs or low-flow sections in the system. Operational practices that ensure short resident time and circulation within the system can minimize nitrification problems. Low circulation areas of the system, such as dead ends, that would be like putting your substrate right at the bottom of your aquarium. That is a dead end, as I've explained in my videos. And reservoirs are prime areas for nitrification occurrence, since detention time and sediment buildup can be much greater than in other parts of the system. So then it goes on. The next one is microbial population. Now this is all part of the lesson that they teach in college. As shown in the nitrification process, ammonia is first oxidized to nitrite ions. Then the nitrite ions are oxidized to nitrate ions. Each oxidation is carried out by a different group of bacteria. The ammonia oxidation bacteria, known as AOB, which I have talked about in my videos, the same thing I'm talking about here, and the nitrite oxidation bacteria, known as NOB. Each group of bacteria has multiple species, and wastewater treatment processes may contain several species of each group. Most textbooks describe of the nitrification processes refer to nitrosomatous species as the AOB and nitrobacteria species as the NOB, and this simplification can serve the process operator and troubleshooter well, as the two groups have well characterized both conditions. Nitrifying bacteria are autotrophs. They use inorganic source of carbon, such as carbon dioxide and carbonate ion, to produce biomass, in contrast to the great majority of other microbes in this system, heterotrophs, which typically use a variety of organic substances both as an energy and carbon source. The autotrophs grow and reproduce much more slowly than the heterotrophs. Example, nitrosomatous may divide once in 8 hours compared to the fast-growing heterotrophs that may divide every 20 minutes. In addition, the autotrophs are more sensitive to the growth condition such as pH, temperature, and the presence of toxic compounds. Okay? That's exactly what I've explained in my videos. That exact what they are doing in this lesson here at this college. Okay, I'm just giving you excerpts. I'm not giving you a whole lesson because it's way too much. This video is going to already be pretty long as it is. Bacteria remove nitrogen from wastewater by a two-step biological process, nitrification followed by denitrification. Technically, it is a three-step process. Ammonification precedes nitrification and denitrification. Organic nitrogen to ammonia through a process called hydrolysis. In the majority of situations, more ammonium and ammonia is created during ammonification. The actual ratio is influenced by pH and temperature. The biological conversion of ammonia to nitrate nitrogen is called the nitrification. Nitrification is a two-step process. Bacteria known as nitrosomatous convert ammonia and ammonium to nitrite. Next, bacteria called Nitrobacter finish the conversion of nitrite to nitrate. Biological nitrification is the process in which nitrosomatous bacteria oxidize ammonia to nitrite and nitrobacteria oxidize nitrite to nitrate. This process results in an overall conversion of ammonia to nitrate. These microorganisms are autotrophs, which means they derive their carbon source from inorganic carbon, such as carbon dioxide and bicarbonate. Most other types of organism is activated sludge or heterotrophs. Now, when they say activated sludge, you can kind of put in there filter medium. Okay, when they use the word activated sludge, you can basically put filter medium. That you would put in your canister. That you would put in a plenum. That you would use in your hang on the back. That you would use in a sump. Okay, so don't let that activated sludge or heterotrophs. What they basically mean is the filter medium. They call it sludge. We call it the filter medium, of which we are using, which are copies of sewage treatment plant facility mediums that we are using, which means they derive their carbon source from the organic matter and the wastewater. Environmental conditions of pH alkalinity, temperature, dissolved oxygen concentration, and organic loading affect the nitrification process in the activated sludge plants. The reactions are generally complied and processed rapidly to the nitrate form. Therefore, nitrite levels at any given time are usually low. These bacteria, known as nitrifiers, are strict aerobes, meaning they must have free dissolved oxygen to perform their work. That is usually between what our aquariums are, between 8 parts per million and 2 parts per million. Okay. Nitrification occurs only under aerobic conditions at dissolved oxygen levels of 1 milligram a liter or more. Usually that the process slows down so much at 2 milligrams a liter that it's not working as efficient even at 1 milligram a liter. That's very low oxygen level. It's still working, but not as efficient as oxygen levels are at least above 2 milligrams a liter. Okay? At dissolved oxygen levels, DO concentrations of less than 0.5 milligrams a liter, the growth rate is minimal. And I've explained this, that when I've used my plenum or Anoxic filtration, so the tests I have done have found oxygen levels as low as 0.5 to 0.3 parts per million or milligrams a liter. Very low oxygen levels. They're talking about this right now in this lesson. Nitrification requires a long retention time, a low food to microorganism ratio, a high mean cell resident time, measuring as MCRT or sludge age, and which, don't get that word sludge to mess you up. It would just be your biological material age. Okay, they use the word sludge, we would use the word biological material. And adequate buffering, alkalinity, a plug flow extended aeration tank is ideal. Temperature is also important. Then they go on with different temperatures and on. I'm not going to get into that. Okay, then I'll read another excerpt from the lesson. What is the key factor for achieving nitrification? Mean cell resident time, MCRT. As temperature increases, nitrifier growth rate increases. As nitrifying growth rate increases, required MCRT decreases. For every 10 degrees centigrade increase in temperature, nitrifier growth rate doubles, requiring MCRT, sorry about that, is cut in half, and required MLSS concentration is also reduced. As dissolved oxygen increases, nitrifying growth rate increases up to the DO levels of about 5 milligrams a liter. Maintain dissolved oxygen concentrations at 2 milligrams a liter or higher. That's why I use the 2 parts per million of oxygen. They're saying right here, maintaining dissolved oxygen concentrations of 2 parts per million or higher for optimum nitrification. So for optimum nitrification, you must keep your substrate at least at 2 parts per million of oxygen level for optimum. Once that starts dropping from there, you're not going to have optimum conditions anymore. You're going to have less than optimum conditions, and your whole nitrification process is going to slow down or cease. We're going to get more into this. Nitrification consumes alkalinity and lowers pH in the activated sludge mix liquor. pH below 6.5 or above 8.0 can significantly inhibit nitrification. This is the reason you get people who have discus where they have to keep their water at 6.5, or sometimes they keep it even a little bit more acidic. It inhibits nitrification process. And once you inhibit the nitrification process, what happens? You have to do water changes, and you have to then maybe have sick fish. Your discus wind up getting sick. Even with water changes, because you're so acidic that the process has been inhibited. This is right from the textbook I'm reading you. Okay, another one. The optimum pH for Nitrosomatis and nitrobacteria is between 7.5 and 8.5. Most treatment plants are able to effectively nitrify with a pH of 6.5 to 7.0. Nitrification stops at a pH below 6.0. So definitely this is when we have crashes of aquariums. They make an aquarium, they put the substrate on the bottom, a nice thick substrate. They don't realize the pH starts going below 6.0. Boom, you have a crash. Why? Because nitrification stops once pH reaches 6.0. Then you have a problem, ammonia problem, and you have a crash of the aquarium. The nitrification reaction, that is the conversion of ammonia to nitrate, consumes 7.1 milligrams a liter of alkalinity as CaCO3 for each milligram of ammonia nitrogen oxidized, an alkalinity of no less than 50 to 100 milligrams a liter is required to ensure adequate buffering. Then I'll skip the other parts of this lesson because it's just basically temperature. Then it goes on to this, another interesting part. The first step at the treatment plant is to get the ammonium ion away from the organic. This is done in two different ways. The first way is simple time. With a little time, sewage becomes stagnant and the ammonia group just falls off. The second way is that the microbes that like to eat carbon chains will do so and leave the ammonium group behind. Now that the ammonium is detached from the carbon chain, it is called ammonia. Ammonia is an interesting thing. It actually has two different forms. Most people think ammonia and the NH3. This form is actually ammonia gas. The form of ammonia to separate from the organic is NH4, the ammonium ion. These two can change back and forth depending on the pH in the water. If the pH is high, more NH3 is present. If the pH is neutral or low, most of the ammonia is in the form of ammonium ion. Now that we have ammonia, we move on to the next step. An aeration tank and a trickle filter. There are all kinds of different little microbes to eat carbon-containing foods, but there is only one particular little microbe that eats ammonia. Its name is Nitrosomatis. It eats ammonia ions for its energy food source. In the natural biological process, Nitrosomata eats ammonium ions and produces nitrite, or NO2, as a product. Once they, Nitrosomatis, produce nitrite, the nitrobacteria come along and quickly make it into nitrates, or NO3. The nitrobacteria it's so much faster at doing its work, changing nitrite to nitrate as fast as it gets it. This two-step process, which ammonia is changed to nitrite and then nitrate, is called nitrification. It has more written in the lesson, but these are things like suspended growth reactors, extended aeration, batches, all this really oxidation ditches and stuff like that. All this really in the lesson doesn't substantially affect us as hobbyists. So I'll carry on the part that affects us directly as hobbyists. When nitrosomatis and nitrobacteria convert ammonia to nitrate, there is a chemical reaction that can be used to describe the overall change, which is NH4 plus 2 oxygen 2 equals NO3 plus 2H plus H2O. Biological denitrification is the process in which microorganisms reduce nitrate to nitrite and nitrite to nitrogen gas. Heterotrophic bacteria normally present in activated sludge perform this conversion when there is no molecular oxygen or dissolved oxygen and there is sufficient organic matter. Now this, what I have just read, can get a little confusing to the hobbyists, because as I go on in this text, it in a way contradicts itself, but I will try to explain it and make it a little clearer to you as I go on, okay? Because it starts getting confusing here of, well, hold it, does it use oxygen or doesn't it use oxygen? Or is it, because this is what you've been telling us. This is what I've been telling you. The bacteria derive their oxygen from oxygen-contained and nitrate. The nitrogen gas produced is in the form of nitric oxide, NO, nitrous oxide, N2O, or nitrogen gas, N2. The net removal of nitrogen is accomplished by stripping the nitrogen gas formed during denitrification out of the water in a subsequent aeration process. That would make sense. That would be where the water and interface of water and air are contacting each other. And of course, if you were using any kind of oxygen bubbles or anything, that would be gassing off the N2. Dissolved oxygen inhibits denitrification. As dissolved oxygen increases, denitrification rate decreases. Therefore, that is why we make a plenum to keep oxygen levels very, very low, or we make BCB baskets to keep oxygen levels very, very low. Maintain dissolved oxygen below 0.3 milligrams a liter in the anoxic zone to achieve denitrification. I will read that again. Maintaining dissolved oxygen levels below 0.3 milligrams a liter in the anoxic zone to achieve denitrification. As you notice, it talks about the anoxic zone. From this, we see that the process required oxygen and produces hydrogen ions. Adding hydrogen ions to water is the same as adding acid to water. It can make the pH go down. Nitrifiers stop working if the pH gets much below 6.8. The pH of an aeration influence will stop nitrifiers unless some chemical is already in the water to soak up those hydrogen ions. That chemical is called alkalinity. Alkalinity actually refers to the number of chemicals that collectively do the job of absorbing acid. One of those chemicals is calcium carbonate, CaCO3. The measurement of alkalinity in milligrams a liter is actually given as a concentration of calcium carbonate. that would absorb just as much acid as all those in the water sample collectively do. Alkalinity is critical in absorbing or buffering the pH during nitrification. For each pound of ammonia converted, there will be well over 7 pounds of alkalinity used up. If there isn't more than enough alkalinity in the aeration influence, the pH will drop like a rock, and so will the rate of nitrification. If there isn't enough alkalinity in the aeration influence, calcium carbonate or other acid-absorbing chemicals will need to be added. Optimum pH values for denitrification are between 7.0 and 8.5. Denitrification is an alkalinity producing process. The biological product of nitrate, NO3, to nitrogen gas by facultative heterotrophic bacteria is called denitrification. That's what I've been telling you. The biological reduction of nitrate to nitrogen gas by facultative heterotrophic bacteria is called denitrification. Heterotrophic bacteria need a carbon source as food to live. Facultative bacteria can get their oxygen by taking dissolved oxygen out of the water or by taking it off of a nitrate molecule. Remember, I have explained that, where if oxygen levels are very, very low, it could use that oxygen. But if it needs to increase itself, depending on its food source, it can steal oxygen from nitrates, nitrites, phosphates. All these carry an oxygen molecule that facultative bacteria can use. That's basically what they're saying. Let's see, facultative bacteria can get their oxygen by taking dissolved oxygen out of the water or by taking it from nitrate molecule. Denitrification occurs when oxygen levels are depleted and nitrate becomes the primary oxygen source for microbes. This gets a little confusing because he's saying when it's depleted. So therefore people are thinking, well, we're talking about anaerobic. No. Anaerobic, if you allow anaerobic to take over and there is no oxygen, you get assimilatory denitrification, which is the process of turning everything back into ammonia. We do not want more ammonia. We want to take it out of the system. So them saying that oxygen levels are depleted, well, what they're really referring to, if you go in the lesson that we already went through, they're talking about low oxygen levels of like 0.3, 0.2, 0.1 milligrams a liter. There's still oxygen present, but it's at extreme low levels that it hasn't become an anaerobic situation to cause assimilatory denitrification. And a sewage treatment facility, that would be redundant. You don't want to make more ammonia. You've gotten rid of the ammonia, so you need to watch what you're doing with facultative bacteria to get rid of the nitrogen that is left in the water because we as humans cannot drink it. The process is formed under anoxic conditions when the dissolved oxygen concentration is less than 0.5 milligrams a liter, ideally less than 0.2 milligrams a liter. When bacteria break apart nitrate to gain the oxygen, O2, the nitrate is reduced to nitrous oxide, N2O, and in turn, nitrogen gas, N2. Since nitrogen gas has a lower water solubility, it escapes into the atmosphere as gas bubbles. A carbon source is required for denitrification to occur. Since denitrification bacteria are facultative organisms, they can use either dissolved oxygen or nitrates as an oxygen source for metabolizing and oxidation of organic matter. If dissolved oxygen and nitrates are present, bacteria will use the dissolved oxygen first. So, do you understand what I just said? I will read it again. If dissolved oxygen and nitrates are present, bacteria will use the dissolved oxygen first. That is, the bacteria will not lower the nitrate concentration. Denitrification occurs only under anaerobic or anoxic condition. When he says, or when the textbook says anaerobic, under those conditions, you produce assimilatory denitrification, which produces more ammonia. Or it will happen under anoxic conditions, when that conditions produces nitrogen gas. Which one do you want? Another important aspect of denitrification is the requirement for carbon. That is, the presence of sufficient organic matter to drive the denitrification effect. The efficiency of denitrification includes nitrate concentrations, anoxic conditions, presence of organic matter, pH, temperature, alkalinity, and the effect of trace materials. I think I've went into this all my videos of trace materials, and one important trace element is iron. Denitrification organisms are generally less sensitive to toxic chemicals than nitrifiers and receive from toxic shock loads quicker than nitrifiers. In other words, they recover from shock. Because a lot of people said, what if I add a chemical to my tank? Can the anoxic filtration? Yes, because they bounce back faster from that shock than nitrifier bacteria will. Temperature affects the growth rate of denitrification organism with a great rate at higher temperatures. Denitrification can occur between 5 and 30 centigrade, and these rates increase with temperature and types of organic source present. The higher growth rate can be found when using methanol and acetic acid. A slightly lower rate using raw wastewater will occur, and the lowest growth rates are found when relying on are often run as well. Relationships are given below. Okay, that's not important for us in our aquarium taking. That's more for sewage. So now I'll get into the part of the lesson where it says aerobic versus anoxic. Now this is what's being taught in the textbooks at universities and colleges. I'm just reading you verbatim what's written here. When you think of a tank that has aerobic conditions, you know that there is plenty of oxygen in the tank. Likewise, an anaerobic tank is one without oxygen. There is one other thing to consider. If dissolved oxygen in the tank is gone, the tank is not necessarily anaerobic. Both nitrite and nitrates have chemically combined oxygen. If aerobic microbes run out of dissolved oxygen, now remember that, if aerobic microbes run out of dissolved oxygen, they get a little creative and break down those nitrogen chemicals to get oxygen they need. Of course, those aerobic microbes are Faxutata bacteria. If a tank has no dissolved oxygen, but it does have nitrates in it, the tank condition is called anoxic. The aerobic microbes can still function when the tank conditions are anoxic. This is something what happens in the final settling tank of an activated sludge process. In the clarifier, the aerobic microbes use up the dissolved oxygen left from aeration and then start to use the oxygen from nitrates. As the nitrate gets broken down, the microbes use the oxygen and leave the nitrogen. The nitrogen is in the form of nitrogen gas. At first glance, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Nitrogen gas is non-toxic and should just float to the surface of the clarifier and go into the air. The problem is that the microbes inside the flock particles are the ones to run out of dissolved oxygen first, then start using nitrates and making nitrogen gas. When this happens, the nitrogen gas bubbles cause the flock particles to rise to the surface with nitrogen bubbles inside. The process of microbes converting nitrate to nitrogen gas is called denitrification. Denitrification is a good process to have, but not in the clarifier. The process of denitrification is not done by the nitrogen microbes. Instead, it is certain carbon eaters that change the nitrate to nitrogen gas because they need oxygen. The product of denitrification and the nitrogen gas is also the end of the nitrogen cycle. The product of denitrification, the nitrogen gas, is also the end of the nitrogen cycle. You notice, and it shows an example of the complete nitrogen cycle going from aerobic to anoxic. That is the complete nitrogen cycle. It is not showing plants. It is not showing water changes. It is showing you how microbes complete the nitrogen cycle. This is what's being taught in our universities and our college to our microbiologists. Why is it that hobbyists can't seem to understand this simple process? Okay, it continues on. Now that we know how nitrifiers work by themselves, we need to look at how they work with the rest of the microbial population. As we already know, there are small microbes known as bacteria and big microbes known as protozoa. Nitrifiers are part of the small microbe population. These small microbes are separated into two categories. Now you're getting into something you probably never heard of. The microbes that eat the organic material, the carbon, that they are known as carbonaceous. The second group eat nitrogen compounds and are therefore called nitrifiers. It is much easier to get carbon-eating microbes to eat than it is to get nitrogen-eating microbes to eat. Carbonaceous microbes, there's something you never hear about, do you? Carbonaceous microbes are the young adults of the population. They eat a lot and likewise reproduce. The nitrifiers are the senior citizens of the small microbe population. They are older, pickier about eating conditions, and reproduce much less than the carbonation microbes do. In terms of activated sludge, the carbonation microbes will do great, but the nitrifiers won't start to eat. If the average age of the microbe is too old, the nitrifiers will do a great job. But if the carbonation microbes start to die, from this we can more clearly see why a two-stage secondary process works best. Activated sludge and thickening filters both work well as a first-stage process to lower CBOD. The extent of nitrification in trickling filters depends on a variation of factors, including temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, presence of inhibitors, filter depth, and the media type, loading rate, and the wastewater BOD, low rate trickling filter, allowing development of high nitrifying population. If the two filters were used, heterotrophic growth occurs in the first filter and nitrification in the second filter. The rest that it's talking about is insignificant to us hobbyists. So I will get into now wastewater management and denitrification. Now that your plant is nitrifying, what do you need to do to make it denitrifying? You can just substitute the word plant for aquarium, right? Okay. Answer: establish anoxic conditions somewhere in the activated sludge process. That would mean the medium. Somewhere in the medium, you have to establish anoxic conditions. Pre-denitrification uses anoxic zones at the beginning of the activated sludge tanks. In generous carbon sources at low water temperature, wastewater can be denitrified unless it is first nitrified. How will you know when all the nitrate is used up? How will you know when all the nitrate is used up? The next place the microbes will go for their oxygen source is the sulfate. As the sulfates are used up, sulfates will combine with hydrogen to form hydrogen sulfide, and this stinks like rotten eggs. Okay, so do you understand what I just read there? How will you know when all the nitrate is used up? The next place the microbes will go for their oxygen source is sulfate. So this is what they call assimilatory denitrification. This is what happens when you make a deep sand bed and you place your substrate on the bottom. Okay, you then will produce these bacteria, and sulfite will combine with hydrogen to form hydrogen sulfide, and this stinks like rotten eggs. Why would you want to perform denitrification at your facility? The obvious reason would be total nitrogen limits in your discharge permit. Other include alkalinity and oxygen recovery, the desire to produce a high, stable, efficient, and reduction of problems with rising sludge in your clarification. Post-denitrification uses anoxic zones at the end of the activated sludge tanks. So first you would do all your activation in your filter medium, which is breaking down ammonia into nitrites into nitrates. Denitrification is slower in a post-denitrification zone than in a pre-denitrification zone. What could be done to increase denitrification rate in a post-denitrification zone? Step-feed denitrification uses alternative periods of aerobic and anoxic conditions. Primary influence is fed by multiple points along the tank to provide carbon source for denitrification. Okay, the rest of the lesson goes into ammonia stripping, BOD tank ratio, and then assignments and stuff that does not pertain. So here it is in a nutshell of what's being taught in our universities to our microbiologists. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And therefore, we now have went through excerpts of the lesson that is being taught by the MECC to wastewater management to get a degree in that. As I have talked on my station, now, what is not understandable of what I just said, if wastewater treatment plants have to get rid of nitrates through anoxic conditions, basically they're using an anoxic filter. Anoxic filters are nothing new. I've said that. Manufacturers try to create them by creating biomediums that are out there, such as spheres, balls. Eheim makes them, biozone. They come in different colors, from everything from a reddish color to black to white to sintered glass. All these mediums that I'm talking about are designed to create anoxic filtration by manufacturers. I show you a way of doing it, plus using the ion exchange by making negative and positive ions collect together. However, we are using the sewage treatment plant facilities. Anytime you buy Biozyme or any of those medias out there, the manufacturer has designed those medias off of sewage treatment plant facilities to create anoxic conditions to denitrify your water. Not only do these bricks and balls and spheres create conditions for aerobic bacteria, but inside the cells themselves are cells living bacteria, the facultative bacteria, that are therefore trying to steal the oxygen in there from nitrogen. And if phosphates are there, they will try to take that oxygen. If nitrite is there, they will try to steal that oxygen. That is what manufacturers are doing. They're making an anoxic filtration. They don't call it that. They don't tell you the medium is actually trying to replicate what sewage treatment plants are doing by making an anoxic filtration system that they use. So, if sewage treatment plants in the United States provide 330 million people with water, and they took the nitrates out by using an anoxic filtration system, and they explain to you how the nitrogen cycle really works. It's not the way it's written on the internet. It's not the way the little pictures show that we do water changes. How do you do a water change in a sewage treatment plant when you're treating the water that has to go back out to the people? You don't. This is just something hobbyists have come up with. Oh, you do a water change. Now, here's the oxymoron of the whole thing. People who don't even want to hear about an anoxic filter, they don't even want to talk about it. They'd rather close their channel down. They're using water out of a tap that was cleaned up by an anoxic filter. That's the whole thing. You're using water out of your tap that was cleaned up using an anoxic filter with facultative anaerobic bacteria to clean it up, so you have this nice, clean, nitrogen phosphate-free water coming out of your tap that has chlorine and chloramine in it to keep it germ-free so it won't make you sick. And plus, the government standards require that they do this. These are the government laws here in the United States. You have to take nitrates out. So if they're using an anoxic filtration system, and you're using water that was actually treated with an anoxic filtration system, how can you tell people you don't want to talk about an anoxic filtration system when you're being a hypocrite by using water that was clean within an anoxic filtration system? And manufacturers are designing products out there to literally, like BioBalls or Biozyme and stuff, to recreate what sewage treatment plants are doing by making an anoxic filter. And can anyone explain that to me? You're being a hypocrite then. You're saying, I don't want to talk about it, but I want to fill up my fish tanks with water that's been cleaned by an anoxic filter and makes it safe for human consumption for 330 million people. But yet, I don't want to talk about anoxic filters, yet all manufacturers out there are creating biomedia out there to recreate an anoxic filter. But I don't want to talk about it. I'd rather take my channel and close it up. This is how stupid this sounds and how obtuse these people sound when they start talking this way. The very water that you get out of your tap, the very water you get out of your refrigerator, the very water that's in that water bottle, all comes from sewage treatment facilities that use an anoxic filter to get rid of the nitrates and phosphates that are in that water because the government requires it. So, what's happening here? Why are you being a hypocrite? You're being a hypocrite because you're not selling a product. You're being a hypocrite because you don't realize you are alive today because of sewage treatment facilities that use an anoxic filter to clean your water up to government standards that bring nitrates down below 10 parts per million and phosphates down to nothing because of your health. And yet you don't want to talk about it and you don't want to educate the hobbyists. All you want to do is try to convince hobbyists that fish are different animals than any other animal on the planet. Fish are completely, they can take nitrates up to 200-300 parts with no harm done. How do you know there was no harm done? How do you know? Did you take them and do an autopsy on them? Did you do a biopsy on them? Did you do anything on the fish to find out if any damage? Did you do a before and after to find out if the high nitrates? They have done these studies in Japan and have found out that high nitrates do affect fish. They affect the high of fish, which is the white, the coloration of fish, and the health of fish. They have done studies on this of too many nitrates in ponds with koi and goldfish. So why isn't it that the hobbyist just doesn't accept the fact that this is what's being taught in our universities, this is how our water is cleaned, this is how it's made safe for 330 million people, and yet you refuse to accept the facts of science. They call people like that flat earthers. They still believe the earth is flat. Oh, Dr. Anoxic is completely wrong. He's completely wrong, and I know more because I've been in this hobby for 15 years, and I know a lot more. Or I did some experiments, and I put a few tanks up, and he's completely wrong. Really? Then why are all the manufacturers making all these medias out there that have all these pores and micropores like Sorparex and stuff to allow anoxic conditions to exist so they can then utilize the nitrates that are in our aquarium or our ponds? Why are they doing it? Just because they don't use the word that if you use our product, you will create an anoxic filtration system. Just because they don't say it doesn't mean they're not trying to do it. They are trying to replicate what sewage treatment plants, facilities are doing. We've always tried to replicate what they are doing in our aquariums. No matter how you slice it or dice it, we are copying our municipal water treatment plants in our aquariums. We do not have natural systems. Without this technology, without this knowledge, we would not have aquariums as they are today. We would not have the fish existing today. We would not have anything existing without utilizing sewage treatment plant facilities. Whether you use a sponge filter, hang on the back filter, canister filter, a sump, these are all technologies from sewage treatment plant facilities. That's why manufacturers make all these sponges and they'll make then this biomedia, special biomedia that you put into their canister filter. What do you think that biomedia is there for, people? It is there for to make anoxic filtration system, to take out nitrates out of the water. That's why they are designing that biomedia, to mimic that of sewage treatment facilities. So the only thing I can say is these people, they're hypocrites. They don't mind using water that was cleaned by an anoxic filtration system that keeps them alive, but they refuse to talk about it when it comes to the aquarium hobby. And the only thing I can think of is because of commerce, money. That's all. It has nothing to do with, we know the science is there, we know it's being taught in our universities, we know everything there is to know, we know how to do it. Why aren't they accepting it? It's because it means cutting into profits. And when it means cutting into their profits, they don't want to talk about it unless it's a product they can package and sell to the consumer. Then they do not want the consumer to know. So this is Dr. Novak. Thank you very much for watching this. I know this video has upset quite a few people, but you know what? I really don't care. This is what's being taught in our universities and our schools. This is how sewage treatment plants work. They use anoxic filters. The whole nitrogen cycle is based off of aerobic all the way down to anoxic condition. That is the complete nitrogen cycle, as I've explained to you several times in my video. So until next time, happy fish keeping, and thank you for watching.